Good morning, everyone. It is Friday, October the 30th, 2020. It is currently 10:07 a.m. Central Time, and I'm coming to you live from Victory Baptist Church, located here in Ovalo, Texas. And I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know what to say, but obviously I'm going to try to say something because I've hit the big red go live button. All right, but I don't really know what to say. But we're going to look at it anyway. We're going to talk about it. We're going to try to figure it out because what we have here in front of me right now, what we have in front of us, right? It's in front of me, but I'm going to be placing it in front of you, is, I guess we'll call it some spiritual advice, some spiritual counsel from someone who lived a long time ago. And I don't know if I quite understand their advice. I don't know if I really understand, not only if I understand it, I don't know if I know how to really apply it, how to explain it to you so that it could possibly have benefit in your life and my life. I really don't know, but I'm going to put it before you, and then hopefully, I always hope this, it sparks a good conversation. In other words, you'll listen, you'll think, you'll meditate on it, and then you'll contact me and go, well, I think this is what he was trying to say, or I don't really understand it, or I completely disagree with it, or I completely agree with it. Whatever your perspective may be, I'll be very interested in hearing it. Now, there's something I've been trying to do for a very long time now in 2020, and that is I constantly am trying to get Christians to turn away from all of the noise, all of the arguing, all of the fighting that is happening either via social media, all the noise that's coming at us from the media. Right now, it just seems like everything is ready to explode in our culture. And I keep trying to tell Christians, you've got to step away from all of that. You've got to turn away from all of that. And you need to focus on the things of God. You need to set your affections on things above. We have to. Look, there's got to be someone. And within this world right now that's so divided and there's so much noise and there's just so many problems, there've got to be some individuals who can step back from all of that, who try to maintain a spiritual perspective, a biblical perspective, that we can offer people something different. So while everything's going crazy in the world right now, and I'm not saying we should never talk about it, because obviously there are times I turn this microphone and talk about some of the crazy things going on, I'm trying to maintain a healthy biblical balance, because what we need to do over and over and over again is step away from all of that and turn our attention to things that are spiritual. So that's what I've been trying to do. And one of the things I've used to try to accomplish this is I've tried to tell everyone to get a copy of The Imitation of Christ by Thomas à Kempis, and let's work through the book. Let's do so in a devotional manner. I want you reading it. I want you thinking about it. I really tried to get people to kind of buy into this idea. Look, everything's going crazy. Let's get our focus on things that are spiritual. And some people have emailed me and said, thank you very much for what you're trying to do. I really appreciate it. I really like it. I don't feel like it's been that successful, but I think it's needful. And those are two very different things. Successful is based on how many downloads I get. Successful sometimes is, from a human perspective, success is based on how many downloads I get, how many streams I get, how many emails I get, how many comments I get, how many likes do I get. Like, those are the things that sometimes we look to for success. But there are times within Christianity that you have to do what is needful, not necessarily what is successful. I think it is needful right now that you as a Christian, you at times turn away from all of the noise and you get your focus on something spiritual, that you really let your mind dig in, you think about, you meditate, you fill your mind with a spiritual thought, spiritual issues. That's what begins to dominate your thinking. I think that is so needful right now. And so I've challenged everyone, get a copy of The Imitation of Christ, start reading it, start thinking about it. I don't agree with everything in the book. I don't. Obviously, I do not. Thomas à Kempis, his Catholicism comes through. I don't obviously agree with Catholicism, but the book has transcended Catholic theology, and it's influenced people from all different walks of Christianity, from all kinds of different theological perspectives. I've remind people over and over and over again, I was introduced to the book, The Imitation of Christ, in an independent fundamental Baptist church, and they hated Catholicism. Now, I don't know if they understood that the book was written. I don't know if they understood the history of the book. I think if they would have understood the history of the book, they probably would have rejected it. But it's still where I was introduced to the book. And so I find the book to be very, very beneficial in this aspect. Whether I agree or disagree with all its theological perspective, it always makes me stop and think and start trying to consider things from a spiritual perspective. All right. So I think this is needful. And so we're going to jump right in. Okay. This is where we are. If you do not know, if you've missed all the previous episodes, you need to go back and listen. All right. There's a lot. Where we have arrived is book 1. Obviously, we've been in book 1. Book 1, chapter 8. That is where we are. Now, the advice given to us by Thomas à Kempis in book 1, chapter 8 is kind of, I really don't know. I really don't know how to process it, and we'll have to see. But we're going to have to start with a definition, all right? We're going to start with a definition because this word seems to be one of the key words in this chapter. So let me pull this up, all right? We're gonna work on this word. Let's see if you know this word. We're going to work on this word.
Familiarity. Familiarity. Familiarity.
Familiarity, all right? Familiarity, all right? Now, familiarity is defined as this, all right? Here's how familiarity is defined. Close acquaintance with or knowledge of something. Familiarity is defined as close acquaintance with or knowledge of something. Familiarity, again, let me state, is defined as close acquaintance with or knowledge of something. All right. So you have a close acquaintance with something. You are knowledgeable of something. You have a familiarity with it, right? I have a familiarity with certain things I'm very familiar with. I understand it. I know it. And there's other things that I'm a complete stranger to. All right. So familiarity, close acquaintance with or knowledge of something. Here's a second definition. The quality of being well known, recognizability based on long or close association. Right? So familiarity, this person is very familiar with me. I'm very well known to them based on a long or close association. All right. Number 3, relaxed friendliness or intimacy between people. Relaxed friendliness or intimacy between people. I think that third definition may be where Thomas à Kempis is going to try to take us in this chapter in the book, again, book 1, chapter 8 of the Imitation of Christ. I think he's going to go with this idea of familiarity being a intimacy between people. It may also kind of go with the idea of the quality of well-known. It may also kind of deal with close acquaintance, possibly. But I think an intimacy between people is where he is going to go. So let me ask you a question. As a Christian, how important is familiarity to your life as it relates to intimacy with other people? How close should you be with other people? How much familiarity should there be between you and other people? Should there be a lot or should there be very little? Should you be on guard when it comes to familiarity? Should you try to keep familiarity? You don't want to reach this intimacy with people. You want to kind of you want to protect yourself from that. What's the biblical idea here? And why is he even talking about it? It just seems an interesting topic to even discuss. You can see by the title of this episode, that's the title of the chapter, Shun Familiarity. Shun it. Thomas à Kempis wants you and I to shun familiarity. He wants us to stay from it. So he wants to keep us from an intimacy between people. He wants us to not reach a level that there's a quality of being well known because of a close association. He seems to want us to shun that. He doesn't want a close acquaintance. He's trying to tell us to stay away from that. Why? What dangers are there in familiarity with other people? What's the dangers there? What is the danger? Now, just to remind everyone, if you haven't been with us, I've got 2 translations of the Imitation of Christ in front of me. I've got I've got one that I'll kind of refer to as the King James version of the Imitation of Christ. And then I have kind of the NIV translation of the Imitation of Christ. So we will refer to both to try to get clarification here. So are you ready? Let's dig in. All right, here we go. Here we go. Chapter 8 of the Imitation of Christ by Thomas à Kempis. Shun Familiarity. That's the name of the chapter. He begins this way. Lay not your heart open to every man, but discuss your affairs with the wise and him that fears God. Let me stop right there. Read this again. According to Thomas à Kempis, his advice to you, his advice to me is that we lay not our heart open to every man. Don't lay your heart open to every man. Don't reveal your heart to every person. Don't do that. Now, we could ask ourselves in 2020, now Thomas à Kempis obviously did not live in a time where there was social media. There wasn't even the internet. Obviously a very long time ago. He didn't understand social media. So we could ask ourselves, in 2020, with social media, where everyone seems to want to post every detail of their life online for the world to see, right? They almost want to lead to a familiarity, right? Because you want to share everything. You want to share what your kids are doing. You want to share what your kids had for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You want to share to the world what you had for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You want to take photographs of it. You take photographs of this, take selfies of this, take photographs of this. You tell everyone what you're doing. You tell people what you're watching on television. You tell them your thoughts about television, what you're reading, what you're wearing, what you're going to do. I mean, people, if they just look at your timeline on social media, many people become so familiar with all of they know what you think. They know what you do. They probably know your daily schedule. Sometimes they know just by following your social media account carefully. In many cases, they know more about what's going on in your family than maybe even you do, especially if they're following all the members of your family. They may know more about what your kids think than you do. I think social media has almost led to at least there's at least a sense of familiarity. Now you can say they don't really know the real you, but there's still a level of familiarity there. Is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? What dangers could come from that? Now, I think one of the dangers is an obvious one. You're there talking to people on social media and they're becoming more and more familiar with you. You're becoming more and more familiar with them. And next thing you know, you've crossed some line and you've gone from even an acceptable friendship to an intimacy that no one probably anticipated, because it just opens the door for that. Now, he obviously wasn't talking about social media, but he was still warning about this. Again, let's go through this. The first sentence really lays out the warning. Lay not your heart open to every man, but discuss your affairs with the wise and him that fears God. So don't open your heart, lay not your heart open. Don't open your heart to every person. No, you need to be selective. Lay your heart open to and discuss your affairs with those who are wise and those who fear God. So they're saying you need to use some discernment, some discretion to who you open yourself to. I think there's some very powerful wisdom here, right? Now he continues. But we still want to know the why. We still want to understand why he wants us to think this way. So he gives us another warning here. So don't open your heart to every man, only to those who are wise and those who fear God. And next he says, converse not much with young people and strangers. So don't converse much with young people and strangers. Now, why? What is he's concerned with? Don't talk a lot to young people. Why not young people? And strangers. What does he mean by strangers? People you're not acquainted with? Well, social media is a never-ending conversation with strangers, right? So why is he giving these warnings? And this was written a long time ago. So what was the concern? What was the danger? Right? He continues with more warnings. So let's go through these again. Warning number 1, don't let your heart be open to every man. Don't let your heart be open to every man. Let it only discuss your affairs with the wise and those who fear God. Next, converse not with young people and strangers. Then he continues, flatter not the rich. And before great personages appear not willingly. So don't run around trying to flatter rich people. Don't try between people who are great, I guess have some kind of fame, some kind of power, some kind of prestige. Don't appear willingly before them, or like you're eager to be around them, I think is what he means. Let's look at a different translation here. A different translation says this. And I'm going to start from the beginning. Open not thine heart to every man, but deal with one who is wise and feareth God. Be seldom with the young and with strangers. This translation, don't be around the young and strangers on a seldom basis. All right. Be not a flatterer of the rich. Of the rich. I said which. Be not a flatterer of the rich. So don't run around trying to flatter rich people. All right. Nor willingly seek the society of the great. So don't willingly run around trying to find those who have power, those who have position, and try to be around them. Don't worry about trying to run around to find them and to only be around them. Don't do that. Now, why is Thomas à Kempis so worried about this? He's giving us the warnings. He's not giving us the reason. Only don't do that. All right. Okay. Let's see where else he goes here. All right. I'm going to stay in this translation for a minute. All right. Let thy company be the humble and the simple, the devout and the gentle, and let thy discourse be concerning things which edify. So here are the people he says you need to be familiar with. These are the people you need to be close to. These are the people you need to spend time with. Humble, those who show humility, the simple, the devout, the gentle. So try your best to let your company be around those who are humble, those who are simple, those who are devout, and those who are gentle. Only seek to be around that. Now, I struggle with this concept. I struggle with this concept in this way because I think is this kind of the Christian mindset that you only want to be around, do you only want to be around those who in a sense are not sick? You only want to be around those who are spiritually healthy? Or do you want to be, because shouldn't we be around those who need, that we want to be salt and light to? They need the gospel. They need, they need to be discipled. They need, I'm having a hard time here because Jesus was a friend of sinners. And this is seeming to say, hey, stay away from, in other words, don't be around people who are prideful. Only be around the humble. Don't be around those who are not devout, but be around the devout. Or is he saying, don't get to a level of intimacy to those who are arrogant, to those who are not devout? Is he speaking of a familiarity with these? That when he's saying be around, he's saying only seek a familiarity, an intimacy with those. And let's read the list again. With those who are humble, simple, devout, and gentle. In other words, what your intimacy, your closeness, the ones you really open up to are the ones who are humble, simple, devout, and gentle. Those who don't have those characteristics, you want to shun familiarity with them. You don't want to be close to them. All right? Now, and you don't want to seek counsel with them. You don't want to seek advice from those who don't have these characteristics. I think that makes some sense. And then let your discourse, in other words, when you are around these kinds of people, be concerning things which edify. Now, I think if you read this, that this would completely lead Christians to abandoning social media, because you're not around people who are humble, simple, devout, and gentle, because there's so much fighting and arrogance and arguing on social media. It's not even funny. And how much of the discourse on social media, how much is it really concerning things which edify? Really? And how much information? Because people always say, well, I'm only on social media to share photos of my family. How many people need to see photos of your family? How many really need to see all of that? How many people do you really need to see all of the details of your life and your children's life or your grandchildren's life? How many people really need to see that, be aware of all of that? I think there's some tough questions we should ask ourselves. He goes on to say, be not familiar with any woman, but commend all good women alike unto God. Choose for thy companions God and his angels only, and flee from the notice of men. Be not familiar with any woman. Now, clearly, this is being written at a time where he's speaking. And again, this was, remember, written in a monastery. So this is advice maybe specifically for the monks. But we can try to lift it from its historical context and see what we can gain from this. So be not familiar with any woman, but commend all good women alike unto God. Choose for thy companions God and his angels only, and flee from the notice of men. I'm going to go back and pick up the other translation here and see how he handles it in this translation. All right. See here. A desire to be familiar with God alone and his angels and avoid the acquaintance of men. We must have love towards all, but familiarity with all is not expedient. Now, it's interesting, this translation doesn't mention women. And the other translation does. So that leads to some very different interpretations here of what he's referring to. So let's start. We'll break this part down this way. All right. First and foremost, what he wants us to understand is that we should desire to be familiar with God alone and his angels. Or the other translation states it this way: choose for thy companions God and his angels only. So what he is saying is that our true familiarity, our true intimacy, the intimacy that we should desire above anything else, the intimacy that should be the deepest, the intimacy that should be the richest, the intimacy that should be, without any restraint, should be with God alone. Is your intimacy with God far greater than your intimacy with other people? I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's godly people, humble people, devout people. I don't care if it's your spouse. Who is your intimacy the greatest with? It should be with God, because you're to love the Lord thy God with all your heart, mind, body, and soul. You're to love God far greater than you love your family, your own life. Where is the greatest intimacy you have? I think this is what Thomas à Kempis is wanting us to do. He's wanting us to stop and ask ourselves, when it comes to the idea of intimacy, familiarity with people, we need to think about it. We need to analyze it. We need to consider it. We need to be cautious about it. And I think this is a subject that we don't discuss a lot about, especially in light of modern technology. We didn't get a lot of warnings going, hey, this technology is wonderful, but there are grave dangers with it. I think we put our guards down here. I think sometimes when it comes to physical relations with real people standing in front of you, like you see, I think it's easier to put a guard around that. I think you say, okay, look, this could be danger. This could be a bad situation. All right, take some precautions. But when it's an anonymous person, it's you don't see them, you're not around them, they're nowhere near you. I think then we sometimes can let our guards down and enter into an intimacy that we never intended or planned on, or maybe deep down we longed for, and then the next thing you know, one, our intimacy is not with God, it becomes with this other person. 2, we have an intimacy with someone we shouldn't have an intimacy with. And 3, we cross some line that we never wished to cross. And the next thing you know, we do great pain and harm to the name of Christ and to others. It's just an interesting subject, intimacy. But he wants the intimacy that we have to be with God first and foremost. That's the intimacy we should long for. And that when we do open ourselves to people, we need to determine who we're opening ourselves to. It needs to be the humble. It needs to be the gentle. It needs to be the devout. It needs to be those who fear God. It needs to be those who are wise. That's who we seek intimacy with. That's who we seek to be open with. Not just anyone. Not just everyone. I think that's his main point. Now, when it talks about women here, again, I don't know which translation we should go with. I think it's interesting that the translations vary so much here. Be not familiar with any woman, but command all good women alike unto God. Choose for thy companions God and his angels only, and flee from the notice of men. I think what he's basically saying, whether it's a woman, whether it's a man, it doesn't matter the gender. What matters is there is an intimacy that is for God, and that's where it should be. And you have to be on the lookout for intimacy with any other person. You have to be on the lookout for it. Now, why is he so concerned with it? Now, I haven't even yet tried to articulate the danger. I think you can see the dangers. Some of the dangers I think they're there. They don't need to even be spoken. You can understand. You're entering into an intimacy with people who are not your spouse, whatever the case may be, and you end up in a bad situation. I think we can all understand that. The other translation, I like the other translation in this sense. He's making sure this warning goes with everyone, no matter the gender. Desire to be familiar with God alone and his angels, and avoid the acquaintance of men. We must have love towards all, but familiarity with all is not expedient. Love all people. Have a love for all people. You are to love even your enemy. But that love for all people does not equate to familiarity with all people. It doesn't equate to an intimacy with all people. A love for people does not equate to an intimacy with all people, because he states that familiarity with all people is not expedient. All right. Now he's getting ready to give us some of the reasons why we need to avoid this intimacy, this familiarity. Here's what he and I'm going back to the older translation that I have here. All right, here we go. Sometimes it turns out that a person unknown to us waxes bright from the good report of others, yet his presence darkens the eyes of the beholders. So sometimes we don't really know this person, and so they seem brighter in our eyes. They seem bright, and then we start having this intimacy with them, and what ultimately happens is their presence darkens the eyes of the beholders. Then we don't really see the situation as it should be. We can become deceived, I guess is what he is warning at. And then he continues, we think sometimes to please others by our company, and we begin rather to displease them with the wickedness which they discover in us. So he says sometimes we think that we're going to be beneficial to other people. We're going to be helpful to other people. We could be a good thing for other people. But the more, if we cross this line of familiarity, that ultimately what we do is hurt them when they discover the wickedness that is in us. So the closer you get to people, the closer they're going to get to the wickedness that's inside of you. Look, this is the one thing that is absolutely true about all of us. We are sinners, and we can sometimes people, if they're not familiar with us, they don't see the wickedness. They don't see the sin. So we appear to be wonderful and great. And then when we become familiar with them, then sadly, they see the wickedness in us. And sometimes we actually do more harm than we set out to do because of the familiarity that we crossed the line and we actually hurt people. I'm going to go back to the other translation here. All right, and read this entire last paragraph. We must love all men, but not make close companions of all. It sometimes falleth out that one who is unknown to us is highly regarded through good report of him. whose actual person is nevertheless unpleasing to those who behold it. We sometimes think to please others by our intimacy, and forthwith displease them the more by the faultiness of character which they perceive in us. Intimacy, familiarity, closeness. Where do we draw the line? Where do we draw the line? Where is too familiar? When do we go to? How much information should we share with everyone? I've talked about this so many times. Within Christianity, we have some freedoms and liberties, but the Bible is very clear that we do not exercise those liberties. We don't exercise those freedoms if that liberty and freedom ultimately hurts someone else spiritually. If we hurt someone else spiritually, then we are to look. If we are going to do something that's going to hurt someone else's spirituality, it's going to hurt their perception of God. Then we give up that freedom, we give up that right, we give up that liberty, at least temporarily, and not do so in front of them because it can hurt them. So I've stated it so many times that you may have certain political opinions, but there's a time and place to share them. But if you share them sometimes on social media, what you may actually do, now you're trying to open yourself up to other people. You're trying to let them see the way you think about this and the way you think about that. You've got to let the whole world supposedly know how you feel. But sometimes all you're doing is causing them to stumble spiritually. You're actually hurting them. You're not benefiting them. You're hurting them. So you've got to think about this. This is a subject that we were all living our lives, and then technology changed, and the next thing you know, we were living our lives basically in the privacy of our own homes, only with the people who knew us and are around us. And the next thing you know, we were living our lives in the presence of millions of other strangers, and many of those strangers, we started sharing every detail of every thought, of every idea, of every perspective, and that created a sense of familiarity that in many cases hurt us, and we hurt them, and ultimately we hurt each other spiritually. So maybe these words from Thomas à Kempis are very relevant to 2020. How they worked in the context of a monastery, it's very fascinating, trying to understand exactly like how these words would have applied to the monks at the time, or to those who read this. How, in a time without the technology. But even there, he was saying, look, there's a familiarity that you should not pursue. There's a familiarity you should not seek. You should not open yourself up to every person. I mean, if there's one thing I have learned, you definitely don't want to do that. Like sometimes even when you think someone is wise, you think someone fears God, and then you seek to confess and open yourself to them saying, here's what I did. Can you help me? And then 5 seconds later, they've hung up the phone and they're now telling anyone and everyone they can. They're gossiping, they're slandering, they're doing nothing but hurting and harming. And you're like, what? You know what? Shouldn't have told anyone. Should have just kept the mouth, should have just stayed quiet. Just should not have told anyone. Because sometimes that's sad the way it works. So you got to be wise on who you open yourself to. It's supposed to be those who fear God and are wise, but sometimes those you think who fear God and are wise are the very people who will then seek to it's only going to produce harm. I think we'll try to end it with some basic points. We must seek a familiarity and an intimacy with God that far surpasses our intimacy with anyone else. So how is your intimacy with God this morning, this afternoon, whatever time it may be, this evening, whenever you may be listening, this late night hour, whenever you may be listening? How is your intimacy with God? I mean, honestly, if you were to measure your intimacy with God, a lot of times you'll see these articles in magazines about your intimacy with your spouse. How intimate are you? Is your intimacy in danger? And they try to give you a test. Well, how is your intimacy with God? How intimate are you really with God? Or is God simply an academic concept? Is God just a theoretical principle, but you're not really intimate with God in any meaningful way? Well, I think then your spiritual life is in danger, right? And sometimes The intimacy that we so think that we need, the intimacy that we long for, we typically try to seek to fulfill that need for intimacy in other people. But we need to find the fulfillment of the intimacy we desire in God and God alone. I think that's important. So there's number one. How is your intimacy with God? Number two, are you in danger with the intimacy that you have currently achieved, or the intimacy that you're currently seeking with other people? Is there a danger there that you need to pull back on? Is there a danger? Are you in danger in any kind of intimacy with other people? Who could it be? A coworker, social media, whatever. All right. So are you in danger of the intimacy you've reached with other people, or that you're seeking with other people? So how is your intimacy with God? Or is there a danger somewhere when it comes to intimacy, familiarity? Is there a danger you're currently in? What do you need to do to get out of it? And number three, I think you really need to think about it. What are you trying to accomplish on social media? What is your real purpose there? What is your real purpose? What are you trying to accomplish? Why do you got to share every detail with everyone? Why do you care so much what everyone else is doing, what everyone else is thinking? Why do you care so much? Now you've got to be honest with yourself, because I think everyone on social media tends to convince themselves that they're trying to do the right thing, they're trying to accomplish the right thing, and sometimes it's become nothing more than a mindless addiction. And all it is gossip, slander, and you want to be known, and you want to know. You want to know what everyone else is doing, and you want everyone else to know what you're doing. Why? I've stated it so many times. I've always found it fascinating. Back when I was on social media, just of the things people would do. It's like, do I really need to know that you ran 5 miles today? Do I really need to know that? Why do you want the whole world to know that you went jogging today? Why? You want to show me not only that you went jogging, you want me to know how long you jogged, how far you jogged. You want me to know the path you took. Why do you want me to know all of that? There are people who they go on a bike ride, and they want everyone to know that they did a bike ride of 7.8 miles or 22.3 miles. They want me to know exactly how long they went on a bike ride and where they went. And then there'll be photographs along the way. Why? People, they go on a vacation. They want me to know every place they went. They want to show all of their photos. Why do you care that everyone else knows all of the details? Why? You seem more worried about everyone knowing what you did than just enjoying what you're doing. It drives me crazy. You go to a concert, sometimes even at wrestling shows, same thing. But at concerts, you're there watching the concert, and there's 1,000, 10,000 people in front of you, all with their phones held up. I'm like, is anybody actually watching the concert, or is everybody worried about showing the whole world that you're at the concert? Are you more worried about trying to make everyone wish that they were where you are? Or why are you just not enjoying what you are witnessing? Just enjoying it. Now, I know that sounds like a generational thing, and I know I sound like the old man saying, get off my yard. It's not about age. It's not about generation. Just about, it's about stopping and looking at what we're doing. So there, I'll stop right there. I think there's a lot to consider there. And again, he doesn't, the only thing that bothers me about this chapter, and that's the end of the chapter if you didn't know, that's the only thing that bothers me about this chapter is he doesn't really articulate what the true dangers are. He doesn't really say, here's the reason you shouldn't do this. He does very good at saying, don't do it, but he doesn't give me why. And I think some things we can understand. I think in an underlining way, I think what Thomas à Kempis is saying, and I could be wrong here, but I think what Thomas à Kempis is saying, and I know this is very hard for me to be dogmatic here, but I'll throw out a principle. Is it possible that intimacy with others is damaging to our intimacy with God? Or let me state it this way. Is it possible that intimacy with others damages our intimacy with God and damages the other person's intimacy with God? And it can damage the other person's intimacy with God because they see the wickedness in us. It could damage our intimacy with God because we see the wickedness in them. Or it's because the intimacy with one another begins to replace the intimacy that we should find and seek in God alone. Now, it doesn't mean that all intimacy with people are wrong. Obviously, an intimacy with a spouse is not wrong, but Jesus makes it very clear that, hey, your love for God compared to your love with God, your intimacy with your wife should look like hate. I mean, Jesus said, if you don't hate your mother, your father, your daughter, if you don't hate even your own life, you cannot be my disciple. So there's an intimacy with God that must supersede everything else. And can your intimacy with others ultimately hurt your intimacy with God? I mean, sometimes it's a joke. You'll have a Christian young person in your church who seems really passionate about God, really on fire for God. They really seem to love God. And you're like, oh, wow, this is awesome. Here's a young person. They're reading their Bible. They love God. And then all of a sudden you see something. You can almost feel the temperature change. They went from on fire to God until ice. And then you're like, what happened? And I can't say in every situation, but I would say I've witnessed it so many times that I think there's a high probability that this is like in the 90 percentile area. Next thing you know, you find out they just got a boyfriend or they just got a girlfriend. And guess what happens? They abandon intimacy with God to pursue intimacy with another person. Now, how do you find a biblical balance? Yeah, that's a good question. So maybe that's what Thomas à Kempis is trying to say. All right. Here's your opportunity. You interpret Thomas à Kempis. You read that chapter. Book 1, chapter 8, whatever in translation you're using. Give me your thoughts. Email me at newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. And listen, it's far more advantageous to you spiritually to be meditating on this and thinking about this instead of getting caught up in all of the problems currently going on in our society. All right. Doesn't mean we can't talk about the other things. Just we got to keep a balance there. All right. I'll stop right there. Everyone have a great day. I look forward to hearing your thoughts and your interpretations. God bless.